Welcome, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order September 18th, 2023 at 6 p.m. And we'll ask everyone to make sure their cell phones are either turned off or on mute. I appreciate that. Welcome everyone who's participating from home and members of the public that are in the gallery here tonight. And we'll ask everyone to rise, roll Canada, please. Thank you. And again, welcome to everyone that's participating, and special thanks to our staff who put this agenda together tonight. And we'll begin the meeting with the land acknowledgement. As we gather, we are reminded that the municipality of South Huron is situated on Treaty 29 land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As a community, we have a responsibility to honor and respect this territory's significance for the Indigenous peoples who lived and continue to live upon it, and whose practices and spiritualities were tied to the land and continue to develop in relationship to the territory and its other inhabitants today. In the spirit of reconciliation and truth, we acknowledge the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee peoples on whose traditional territory we are meeting. Thank you. We'll move on to our item number 2. Ms. Masua-Carlson.
That South Huron Council approves the agenda as presented.
As our mover, please. Moved by Councillor Neeb, seconded by Councillor Oak. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That carries with 6. Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof from members of council. Are there any disclosures at this time? Not seeing any. We have no presentation on item 4, no delegations, no public meeting, and we move on to 7.1. Ms. Masua-Carlson.
That South Huron Council adopts the minutes of the public and regular council meeting of September 5th, 2023, as printed and circulated.
And a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Neeb, seconded by Councillor Vaughn. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? And that carries with 6. Thank you. Councillor Board and Committee reports, 8.1. Ms. Masua-Carlson.
That the minutes and reports of the following committee and or board be received as presented to council. Police Services Board, minutes of June 13th, 2023, and May monthly report.
And mover, please. Moved by Councillor Neeb, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? And that carries with 6. Thank you. 8.2, please.
That the draft minutes of the September 7th, 2023 Fire Services Advisory Committee meeting be received as presented to council.
And a mover, please. Councillor Oak, seconded by Councillor Neeb. Any discussion? Councillor or Deputy Mayor, go ahead, please.
I guess my only comment is that we have a report coming back on our building assessment. And I don't know what the rest of council thinks, but I'm wondering if we shouldn't be deferring this until we get that assessment back. I mean, we all know that the building's not right, but I would rather have the assessment. We've already paid for it. I don't know when it's coming, but maybe staff could help me with that.
Councillor Oak, the comment? Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Mayor. I agree that we have a condition assessment coming. Now, I believe that these items will be coming to a budget meeting because we don't have any of these dollars allocated in the 2023 fiscal year. So these two dollar amounts that are in this first recommendation is just receiving the report. The other two items that I assume will be maybe separate recommendations or separate motions. They're not part of the or they'll have to be referred to a budget meeting coming up, and maybe by then there will be a condition assessment report or some of the details out of that already. Maybe the CEO could comment.
Ms. Carlson, do you have a comment?
Through the mayor, yeah, the report is expected end of this month or early next, so that should be well within the time for budget.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Oak and then Councillor Dietrich, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And just as a follow-up, I guess I agree the condition assessment is one item. We also have a full fire master plan report that we had last year or 2 years ago. And so that's the basis for a lot of the discussions that we had at the committee as well. So.
Thank you. Councillor Dietrich, get a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This money that's being allocated doesn't necessarily mean we've decided where the fire station is going to be. Like it could be in the middle of Crediton as just as well as Dashwood.
Ms. Carlson, can you turn your mic off, please, Milk?
Now, the first resolution that's on the table is just to receive the actual meeting minutes. However, the next two resolutions do reference a preferred site that's been recommended by the committee. However, at the end of the day, it is council decision.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from members of council? Councillor Oak, third, go ahead.
And just to follow, thank you, Mayor, follow up on Rebecca's comments there. Again, these will be referred to the budget meetings to have further discussion on. There's been no decisions as far as council as a whole has to decide the direction at upcoming budget discussions.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions, Deputy, go ahead, please.
What part of, are we voting on this whole thing, or are we just doing one recommendation at a time?
The first recommendation is the only one we have right now. Go ahead, Ms. Carlson, you'll read again.
So this is the resolution that's on the table right now, moved by Councillor Oak, seconded by Councillor Neeb, that the draft minutes of the September 7th, 2023 Fire Services Advisory Committee meeting be received as presented to council.
Okay, if there's no further questions, call the question. All in favor? And that carries with 6. Thank you. Ms. Carlson.
That South Huron Council approve the recommendation of the Fire Services Advisory Committee that staff include a 2024 budget amount of $100,000 for the site preparation work at 177 Center Street, Dashwood, as the preferred location for the replacement Dashwood Fire Station.
And a mover, please. Councillor Neeb, seconded by Councillor Oak. Discussion. Councillor Oak, go ahead, please.
Again, just to reiterate that this is a recommendation that it would be going to the budget meeting for further discussion. And I'd like to, for this one and the next one, have a recorded vote, please.
Very well, Madam Clerk. Are there any further discussions on this? Councillor Neeb, go ahead, please.
Yep, thank you, Mayor Finch. And just to provide a little bit more context for council too, at our last Fire Services Advisory Committee meeting, we reviewed the potential of moving the location of the fire hall to Crediton. What that ends up doing is affecting our level of service and our response time for our firefighters, many of whom are currently in the area around Dashwood. So that would expand the response time over that 10-minute threshold. We also have agreements with neighboring municipalities already too, so those would need to change if there was a move to Crediton. So the advisory committee did look at potential locations, but ultimately decided that it was best to stay within the Dashwood area.
Thank you. Any other comments? Deputy, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I don't have an issue with what is on here, except that I go back to that building assessment. And I understand the fire said that we should be building a hall in a different location, but we don't know whether that assessment's going to say, yeah, the building's okay. We don't know that part. I know we have recommendations from staff that it's not okay, but I still would like to see that recommendation from the assessment on the building come forward before I'm willing to pick a spot and move forward with a new building. Thank you.
Councillor Vaughn, did you have your hand on the mic?
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of the recommendation is to move this to a budget meeting, essentially. And so is it not possible to make the effort to have that building inspection report there at the budget meeting that this is recommended to go for, so that we can have that fulsome discussion at that time? Can we amend the motion to say something to that effect, to include the building inspection report?
Certainly. You're making that amendment then? Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Neeb?
Well,
go ahead.
Sorry, I just
I didn't have my... Oh, sorry. Yeah. That's fine. So are we able to make that amendment then, Mr. Sue Carlson, please?
If the mover and seconder agree, we can just make it a friendly amendment to add that.
Mover, second.
Just a question, sorry. Some of the items that were talked about within that $100,000 were some of the site preparation work. And I'm just wondering, would this slow down the ability to get information at our budget meeting about the costs and timeline for those items?
Mr. Carlson?
Through the mayor, there is an expectation that the report should be received by the end of this month. As long as that timeline is maintained, we should have time.
Councillor Oak?
Yeah, I'd be willing to add that the condition assessment to as part of the budget discussions in the friendly adjustment to the amendment or to the resolution, for sure. I'm sure the condition assessment will say that the building isn't in that bad a shape. It's just a matter that today existing fire equipment new fire equipment doesn't fit into that building any longer. And so we'll but that's part of our fulsome discussion at budget. I agree to add that condition assessment as part of the discussions.
Thank you. And then Councillor Neeb, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm okay, although I don't think that's going to make a difference. The current footprint doesn't allow for the necessary upgrades to facilitate a modern and safe fire station. I know there's health and safety concerns with the current facility, and I think we need to take that into consideration as well as the fact that if we were to purchase new apparatus, it's not going to fit in that building. So in this case, I think, we need to take the step and be leaders and move forward with a new fire station in Dashwood.
Thank you. Councillor Vaughn, I see your finger on the button. No? Oh, okay. Are there any other members of council wish to speak to this? Councillor Dietrich, go ahead.
At one point, someone mentioned maybe seeing what Lambton County was doing or whatever. Were they building a new fire hall, or could we get involved with that, or that's never been researched?
Councillor Oak, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Mayor. I know Deputy Mayor had been in talks with some of the staff, and I believe also our CEO Rebecca has been talking with the CEO of Lambton Shores. But at this point in time, I don't think they have any intentions of doing anything with their station. At this point in time, they're waiting for a new chief that they were in the process of hiring. And until they hire the new chief, they didn't want to make any decisions. So that's what I understand we've been told, but maybe Rebecca, you might comment.
Ms. Basula Collison?
That is correct. They're right in the process of hiring the chief, and then I suspect that discussions will continue.
Any other comments? Okay, excuse me. We have a request for recorded vote. And Miss Wolf, would you be able to read the amended recommendation, please?
Yeah, so just to clarify, the current recommendation on the floor is the first one. And do you want them combined with the second?
Just the one.
Just the first one. Okay. So the recommendation on the floor would be that South Huron Council refer the recommendation of the Fire Services Advisory Committee that staff include to 2024 budget amount of $100,000 for the site preparation work at 177 Center Street, Dashwood, as the preferred location for the replacement Dashwood Fire Station, to a budget discussion meeting at the time when the condition assessment report is available.
Councillor Neeb, Councillor Oak, satisfied with that? Thank you. Okay, and if there's no further discussion, sorry.
So that was a recorded vote. So Mayor Finch,
Yes.
Councillor Vaughn,
Yes.
Councillor Oak,
Yes.
Councillor Neeb,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dietrich,
Yes.
and Councillor Dietrich.
Yes.
Carried 6-0.
Thank you. Next recommendation, Ms. Basula Collison.
That South Huron Council approve the recommendation of the Fire Services Advisory Committee that staff include a 2024 budget amount of $315,000 allocated to the Fire Capital Reserve for the replacement Dashwood Fire Station at 177 Center Street, Dashwood.
And a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Neeb, seconded by Councillor Oak. Discussion. Councillor Oak.
I guess in light of the other recommendation, we should also put in there as the condition assessment report as well. Just to have them the same resolution to make it, and again, a recorded vote, please.
Very well. Is any other discussion? Councillor Oak.
Just some background on the 315,000, where that came from was the committee discussed the idea that there's a fire apparatus that's in the budget for this coming year, projected for 685,000 roughly. So the 315 was a rounding to get us to $1 million towards fire services projected or as part of the budget discussions. So that's where that the 315 number came from, just in case anybody was wondering where that magic number appeared from. So
Very good. Are there any other comments from members of council? Okay, and I'll turn to Ms. Wolf when she's ready to read the recommendation.
That South Huron Council refer the recommendation of the Fire Services Advisory Committee as amended, that staff include a 2024 budget amount of $315,000 allocated to the Fire Capital Reserve for the replacement of Dashwood Fire Station at 177 Center Street, Dashwood, to a budget meeting when the building condition assessment report is available for discussion.
Thank you. Mover and seconder consent to that. Thank you. Any other discussion?
And that was also a recorded vote.
That's correct. Yeah, please proceed.
Deputy Mayor Dietrich. Mayor Finch,
Yes.
Councillor Neep,
Yes.
Councillor Oak,
Yes.
Councillor Dietrich,
Yes.
Councillor Vaughn.
Yes.
That carries 6-0.
Thank you. Moving right along to 9.11. Ms. Masula Carlson.
That South Huron Council receives the memo of Mike Rolfe, Director of Building and Planning Services, CBO, and the report of Craig Metzger, Senior Planner, rehousing update to South Huron official plan and zoning bylaw, and that South Huron Council initiate a housing update to the South Huron official plan and zoning bylaw and direct staff to circulate the amendment for public review under the Planning Act.
And a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Neeb, seconded by Councillor Oak. Any discussion? Councillor Oak.
Thank you, Mayor. Just thanks to both of you for the reports here. Well detailed, and just a question on, I know there's some comments about Bill 23 adjustments relating to that and some of the implications. Now, was there any other bills that you are referencing here as far as any of the changes that there's been a number of changes in the last few weeks or months? It seems like weekly some of these are changing. Just wondering if these are right up to date to the latest bills. And the reason I'm asking is the agricultural section talking about the additional residential units. There had been talk of potentially up to 3 units, and then now there's been maybe some backpedaling of the province to maybe change that. So the 2 that's being referred to, is that the new rules, or just a comment on that?
Who'd like to take that? Mr. Metzger or Mr. Rolfe? Mr. Metzger, go ahead, please.
Sure, I can, through you, Mayor Finch, to Councillor Oak. Yes, this does include all the legislation that's been passed. What you're referring to is the proposed provincial planning statement, which was announced in the spring. There was the proposal for 3 residential building lots for each farm to be able to be severed off. That met with some resistance from the agricultural community. It got walked back, and the province said they were going to reconsider other options. They haven't came out with releasing an update to that proposed policies planning statement as of yet, and we may not see that till early next year. So that actually might be something that gets covered off in our upcoming official plan review. But we've dealt with all of the legislation that's been released and passed to date that's applicable to the zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Metzger. Follow up, Mr. Oak, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And just one follow up on the agriculture side, the 2 ARUs, additional residential units. Would that include? I know there's talks about detached and existing dwellings. Does that is that covered off the existing dwellings if somebody were to put in an apartment in a shed or in a barn? Because it seems like there's a number of houses or barn dominiums that are called or whatever happening more and more all the time. So just wondering if that's covered off in that.
Mr. Metzger.
Yes, in response, it's 2 additional residential units, one of which could be in a detached building. So it could be a house, and then they could still have 1 in the house, or they could choose just to have 2 in the house and none in a detached building. So the limit is 2. only one of which could be in a detached structure.
Thank you. Any other comments, Mr. Oak? You're fine. Any other comments from members of council? Councillor Vaughn, go ahead, please.
Yes, I had a couple of questions for Craig, I think. So again, under agriculture, number 2 talks about expanding permissions for on-farm accommodation, a number of dwelling units to a maximum of 6. And so I was just in my mind's eye, I was trying to figure out what that looks like. Like we, for example, we did the Haters Turkey Farm, 2 rather large buildings, each housing 12 workers per building. So would that be considered 2 units? And they could build 4 more on like the Hater property, or are these units of some other kind of size that I'm not envisioning yet?
Mr. Metzger?
Yes, in response, the Haters was 4 dwelling units. So there was one building, I think that there was a building on the building unit on the one side and one on the other side. They were 2 stories, but each dwelling unit had 6 bedrooms, if I'm remembering that correctly. So with the 4 dwelling units, that was 24 bedrooms, but only 4 dwelling units. But in that case, it was 2 buildings. They were attached with like a breezeway in between, a covered area. What this proposal would be not just 4 dwelling units, but up to 6 dwelling units. And there is no maximum on the number of bedrooms each dwelling unit could have. We believe that would be obviously suitable for an operation like Haters, but also for those that have even more employees, looking more towards our greenhouses as well, where there's a need for more bedrooms. And this would allow them to have the six kitchen areas really that are separated off from each other. And each of those dwelling units, the ones with the kitchen, could have as many bedrooms as is appropriate for their particular operation.
Okay, that gives me a mental picture. The other question has to do with creating an RG1 and I guess an RG1-1 residential greenfield zone. And so that's kind of new terminology, and I'm just wondering what condition kind of brought that to light. What are we trying to accomplish here?
Mr. Metzger?
Yes, through you. First, in terms of what we're trying to accomplish is to be able to speed up the development of process so we could get the homes built quicker. This would be pre-zoning, so a large area. I think the most recent one we had was the Manx development in Exeter behind the rec center at the end of Pride Boulevard. If before that application had come, it's been identified for development for years and years and years. We could have, if we had this particular zone in place, zoned it RG1 with the holding symbol because it doesn't have the lot fabric yet. But RG1 would have identified that it's going to be used residentially, and it can have any of the R1, 2, and R3 uses located in it, and we would lift the holding symbol once we get through the subdivision process. But it would allow it to move quicker through that development process. In the Manx case, we would have used an RG1-1, and that -1 special zone is for areas that are to be opened up that are close to residential areas or abutting residential areas currently. And that special zone just makes sure that none of the exclusive R3 uses, which would be large apartment buildings of over 3 stories, aren't located right next to an R1 or R2 zoned property, which would in all likelihood already be a developed property. So it would move them back 50 meters. So it gives the surrounding neighborhood an idea that no, we won't have any large R3 uses right next to us. We'll either have the R1 or R2 uses, but there may be R3 uses further into the proposed development. And how that development goes in terms of its layout, that would happen at a future point. But it's all about making sure we have lands that are more closer to being development ready for a developer who wishes to develop the property.
Any follow-up, Councillor Vaughn?
No, can't think of any right at this point.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from members of council? Councillor Oak.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question. I know this is a housing review, but part of that is parking requirements, and you mentioned updated parking requirements for various residential uses. Could you just comment on the idea or what you're looking at as far as the parking requirements? It said for dwelling types and permit offsite parking for residential uses as well. So just wondering what that all includes.
Mr. Metzger?
Yes, and you'll see in it that there is reduced parking requirements for the Huron County housing buildings. Now that's based on their experiences with the number with their clients in terms of the number of them that need vehicles. So that's a significant reduction down to 0.25 spaces per unit. In others of them, we're clarifying that in fact, every additional residential unit needs to have its own parking space as well. And in terms of offsite parking, currently we only allow offsite parking for commercial uses. We're proposing that be broadened and extended so that any use, but in particular in this case, residential uses, could provide their required parking off-site. So if they can do maybe some parking with a church, something where it doesn't conflict in terms of the parking, there's other ways that they can acquire that parking as well. So looking at trying to be more efficient around parking and more flexibility while still maintaining the minimums that we've set in the zoning bylaw.
Any other comments from members of council? Follow up, Mr. Oak?
No, thank you.
Councillor Vaughn?
Right, I did have one more question. Under the urban settlement areas, number 12 talks to requiring all residential uses to be subject to the sewage treatment facility buffer overlay. And my question is, what is a sewage treatment buffer facility buffer overlay?
Mr. Metzger?
Yes, that's buffer lay around both the Grand Bend sewage treatment facility and the Exeter facility. And it ensures that there's no residential uses within, I think it's 100 meters around the Exeter facility and 150 meters around the Grand Bend facility. It's currently in the zoning bylaw. It's just a little unclear. It says residential uses and then it lists just a few of them. It should be all residential uses should be outside of that particular overlay.
Okay, good. I understand that now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? We have a mover and a seconder. If there's no further discussion, call the question. All in favor? And that carries with 6. Thank you. Moving right along to 9.3.1, I believe. Ms. Masuda-Carlson.
That South Huron Council received the report from Melissa Keller, Manager of Environmental Services. We request for proposal for automated meter reading AMR system. And that South Huron Council accepts the proposal received from KTI Limited and authorizes the award of a contract to KTI Limited for the provision of an automated meter reading system in the amount of $74,451.66.
And a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Neeb, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That carries with 6. Thank you. Thanks, Alyssa. Next one, 9.3.2.
That South Huron Council received the report from Don Giberson, General Manager of Infrastructure and Development, Read 2023 OSIM inspections, and that South Huron Council authorizes an amendment to GM Blue Plan Engineering Services OSIM inspection agreement to include services related to 2023 OSIM inspections in the amount of $19,800 plus HST.
And a mover, please. Moved by Counselor Neeb, seconded by Counselor Dietrich. Any discussion? Deputy, go ahead. Mr. Garbers here.
Thank you. It says biannual inspections are required for all bridges. We check our bridges every 6 months? Is that what I'm reading, or did I miss something?
Mr. Garberson?
That's every 2 years.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that carries with 6. Thank you. Moving right along, 9.3.3.
Let South Huron Council receive the report from Don Giberson, General Manager of Infrastructure and Development, update on work plan to evaluate the potential extension of the Grand Bend trunk sewer, and that South Huron Council authorizes staff to finalize negotiations with the Trident Group for the Grand Bend trunk sewer extension and prepare a draft cost sharing agreement for council consideration at a future council meeting.
And we have a mover, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor, second by Counselor Neeb. Discussion. Counselor Vaughn, go ahead, please.
Yes, I would like to split this recommendation with, the first paragraph being receiving the report. But the second item about authorizing for finalization with the Trident Group, I'd like that as a second recommendation. And further to that, I'd like to see us actually defer that finalizing negotiation to a committee of the whole to have a more fulsome discussion that relates to budget and relates to a number of items that I felt were not contained within this report that do require further discussion.
Okay, I'll turn to Ms. Missoula Carlson. Comment, please.
Okay, we can deal with the first motion on the split. I can reread that again.
Yes, please.
That South Huron Council received the report from Don Giberson, General Manager of Infrastructure and Development, update on work plan to evaluate the potential extension of the Grand Bend trunk sewer. And that was moved by Deputy Mayor Dietrich and seconded by Councillor Neeb.
Okay, so I have a mover and a seconder. If there's no further discussion, I'll call a question on that one. All in favor? And that carries with 6. Thank you. Second one, Ms. Missoula Carlson.
That South Huron Council authorizes staff to finalize negotiations with the Trident Group for the Grand Bend trunk sewer extension and prepare a draft cost sharing agreement for council consideration at a future council meeting. And as this was a split, it's Deputy Mayor Dietrich and seconded by Councillor Neeb.
And you're asking for it to be deferred, is that correct, Ms.?
I'm asking it to be deferred over to a future committee of the whole meeting so we can talk about it in a more fulsome fashion. I can give a little bit more if it's required for people to understand why I'm going that way.
So that'll be an amendment to that original motion then. We'll just make sure we proceed properly here.
Okay, so it was that South Huron Council defer the recommendation to authorize staff to finalize negotiations with the Trident Group for the Grand Bend Trunk Sewer Extension and prepare a draft cost sharing agreement for council consideration at a future council meeting to a future committee of the whole meeting for discussion.
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a seconder? Counselor Oak. And that's for deferring. Is there? Call the question. Oh, sorry. Alex?
So that was originally moved by Deputy Mayor Dietrich and seconded by Councillor Neep.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, the original was.
Perfect. So that South Huron Council defer the recommendation to authorize staff to finalize negotiations with the Trident Group for Grand Trunk Sewer Extension and prepare a draft cost sharing agreement for council consideration at future council meeting as amended.
So that's moved and seconded. There's no further discussion. Call the question. Counselor Neeb, you have a question?
So we're deferring this to a later, we're deferring the recommendation to a later meeting. Is that correct? Okay, so then I guess my question too is, the part of the recommendation is to prepare a draft cost sharing agreement. And by deferring this, is that going to hamper our negotiations? And are we going to be able to have that data before the budget time has completed?
Mr. Giverson, do you want to respond to that?
Through you, Mayor Finch, that is correct. If you want all the updated, accurate information, we need to continue on with the work plan. So if council wishes to have a fulsome discussion at a committee of whole with all additional information, answering any questions that the council has, this is part of the information that would be provided to council. So with moving forward with the work plan, we would not have all the information that you're requesting.
Counselor Neeb?
So is it possible that we could include in the recommendation that we direct staff to bring that specific information to a committee of the whole so that we have that information before finalizing the negotiations?
Mr. Giverson, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Finch, the purpose of the recommendation tonight is to report back to council on the work plan as we were directed to do so, and to authorize the staff to continue with the work plan. There's still a full opportunity to review an agreement, cost sharing, any of the details. We're simply doing what we were directed to do, and then authorized to go to the next step in the work plan. There's nothing being agreed to, no cost sharing, no bylaw. It's authorizing staff to just continue the next step. So we are in a position where we can provide information so the council can make a decision.
Thank you. Follow up.
I'm not in favor of deferring it, but I am in favor of having that fulsome discussion after we've gotten that information back that's within the recommendation. I do think it's important. We need to keep the work plan moving forward and go over it with a fine-tooth comb once we do get that information back. So I'm in favor of moving forward and having a meeting to discuss those details, but I'm not in favor of deferring.
Thank you. And Deputy, you had something?
Yeah, and I feel the same way. I think we need to have these numbers. We won't have any more to discuss at a next council meeting than we do now without these numbers. So I think we need to move forward with this. All we're doing is staff's getting us numbers so that we can consider them at council. So I'm in agreement. I'm not in favor of deferring this either.
Thank you. Councilor Oak, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so I guess there are some numbers in the report that are being bandied around where it was a 75-25 split and $600,000 potentially for South Huron. And I'm not sure that we can discuss these because they're not even in the budget at this point in time. There was some projections for 2024 in the budget. But we haven't even started 2024 budget discussions as of yet. So to have dollar amounts being bandied around in front of us, I'm not sure that we can honestly talk about them at this point in time. And there were some things in the work plan where I believe the report that Don talked about in 2021 was where growth would pay for growth, and it wouldn't be South Huron footing the bill for any growth, which is the oversizing of the pipe. I agree with the oversizing of the pipe for future. I don't want to dig up the pipe again if there's some, but one of the first things it talked about in that report was growth paying for growth, and not necessarily the users of the sewage treatment paying for this growth. And the budget item actually said front end loading to the developer of the $2.8 million for 2024, and it was in bold on that document, the budget document. So basically the front end loading on that. So there's some things that need to be discussed, and I just thought that I'm in agreement that it should be deferred to a budget meeting where we can actually talk about true dollars, or committee of the whole meeting as part of the budget process to talk about it and get everything out that needs to be talked about, because there is some generalizations in the report. So
Thank you. Don, Mr. Guyverson, go ahead, please, and then Councillor Vaughn.
Through you, Mayor Finch. So I welcome the opportunity to respond to some of those questions. We are still working on the principle of growth pays for growth. So South Huron is not paying, and the taxpayers are not paying the 600,000 or the 25% of the cost. We are going to carry those costs, and the proposal is to have a cost recovery bylaw to recover that cost from whoever's using that capacity in the future. And it was noted in the report, we have one property that's already required to connect to the trunk when it is extended. And we have two other parcels of land that are we've had very active development proposals, but have always been turned down for lack of sewers. So there's no intention of that the taxpayer is paying for the growth component. The growth component, growth pays for growth, and we will be carrying. The proposal is to carry the cost and recover through a cost recovery bylaw. The budget discussions, there are options for council, and I think between now and before something comes back to council, it is quite appropriate to have a committee of the whole meeting to discuss any detail, provide more information, including the question of how are we going to finance or fund the $600,000 portion. So that's a great idea. I welcome that, and we can certainly provide more information. But on the budget front, there are options for council to do a 2023 budget amendment if the developer is on a timeline wanting to start this work in this current fiscal year. We are in the 2024 budget process, and a draft 2024 budget document has already been prepared, so that may still catch up with the process. So there are many options available on the budget front. The timing is really good. because we are in the fall and in the budget discussions. So that works quite well. The question about the front ending agreement, the developer did propose that back in 2020 when this was first initiated, and it was highlighted that way. And the developer is still going to pay up front for their share of the cost. We are not going to carry. That will be part of the negotiations and the agreement that will come back to council. They will, the developer will put up his money for his share of the project. So we're not going to carry his cost. That is consistent with other capital projects that we've carried out for developers. I have examples if council wishes to have that information. So thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Vaughn, you had a comment? Sorry, Councillor Oak.
Just to follow up, thanks, Don, for the answers there. There's some things there that that weren't spelled out in the report, and that's thanks for the clarification. And that's where I'm in agreement with Councillor Vaughn about a fulsome discussion at a committee of the whole, so that some of those things do get flushed out. I totally agree with what you're saying as far as a cost recovery bylaw and those kind of items, but I just wanted to, I don't want to hold up the process, but I want to make sure that I understand the whole process as well. So with a further discussion. So thank you.
Councillor Vaughn, then Councillor Neeb.
Yeah. So Councillor Oak did hit on part of what my whole thinking was when I read the report, that I had more questions than I had answers. So I went back to the referenced November 15th, I think 2021 council meeting, where we actually did approve a motion. And we did approve the work plan, but we also approved a motion that basically had three considerations. And the motion was that South Huron Council direct a report to explore options and provide a framework for council consideration on the Baker Planning Group request, including development paying for development, scoping of the need, and capacity. And so consideration one, development paying for development. So far, what's been presented to council either through the budget or in previous discussions is a principle that growth pays for growth. So to see a recommendation that 75-25, that's quite a shock to my system, because it's not clear to me who's actually going to pay that 25% at the end of the day. So that was part A for a requirement in my mind to have a more fulsome piece of information in a report. Consideration two, scoping the need. There were some commentaries in there about the marine business needing to hook up, but there wasn't actually any commentary about with that hookup that they were going to actually be paying for something. Now, Mr. Giberson has indicated that they are, but that's not in the report. There's also an indication that Oakwood Inn has made inquiries. I don't know what inquiries actually means for Oakwood Inn wanting to hook into that, or if we can continue to run two separate systems, one for Tridon, one for Oakwood Inn, Oakwood Links. Don't really know. Might not be the most cost effective, but again, it's part of the fulsomeness of a report, so that when we're making our governance decisions, we can make them knowing all of these things have been taken into consideration. So those have been mentioned. Some mention about future developments between the northern part of Tridon lands up to 83. But what's not there is there's not an indication of, with those future developments, what the need actually is and the capacity that is actually going to be required. So that's another piece of information that I thought we were going to be getting as a result of what we had agreed upon back in 2021. Also too, there's talk about oversizing a pipe and oversizing the pipe. We have had experience with oversizing pipe before from PS2 to the Grand Bend Sewage Treatment Facility. That oversizing of the pipe and the seasonality and maybe other factors too. It's hard for me to remember all of them, but it meant that we had to replace that pipe when the Grand Bend Sewage Treatment Facility came alive. So I'd like to have an understanding of how did we come with a need to have 25% capacity, and it's not really clear in that report. So that's why I'm asking to defer it to a committee of the whole. And if that's a budget committee of the whole, well, that's fine too. I have other questions. I have 8 other questions. I didn't want to go through all of them, and I'm prepared to present those questions to Rebecca and to Dawn so that when we come to our committee of the whole, these questions, they can be more ready to, discuss them with us. And if there's any other questions that counselors have, because there's no reason why these can't go to everybody, then it would be a good idea to put them out ahead of time. But I'm not prepared to say go forward with a cost sharing agreement with Tridon without understanding better what it is we're agreeing to.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Neeb, and then Deputy Mayor.
Well, and thank you through the chair. And I agree. I'm in favor of having a fulsome discussion. I guess where I'm at is it's a draft cost sharing agreement, and we don't fully know all the details until we direct staff to bring that information back, and then we can find out more details about the 75-25 as well as the Municipal Act cost recovery bylaw that we would have to initiate. So, and where I'm standing, I'm thinking that it would be worthwhile to have all of that information and to direct staff to get any of that information just so that it doesn't change. Because if we wait, I don't know if it's going to be the same. I also don't want to delay the discussions for our budget as well. So, but again, like I am in favor of once that information comes back, we do need to sit down, and there is no recommendation yet about spending that money or directing staff to spend that money. It's just to finalize negotiations at this point. So.
Deputy?
Yeah, and I agree with Councillor Nee, but we have to have something that we can discuss. Right now, as of now, I see nothing here to discuss. I would like to ask Mr. Giberson a question, if I may. Can you help me a little bit on the agreements that we have with Credit and Centralia Huron Park and the south end of Exeter?
Mr. Giberson?
Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mayor Finch. The London Road, there is a cost recovery bylaw for London Road South, and there is a growth component. That one's approximately 25% that's being carried by the ratepayers until development proceeds. And we've had 2 payments on that London Road South cost recovery, $400,000 off the top of my head. Credit in Centralia, is also a cost recovery bylaw with a 20% deferral for growth, and that growth that's being repaid at approximately $10,759.99 because it's chiseled in my brain per lot, which we've recovered several for several housing starts in Credit in Centralia, including Ken Palin's current subdivision with about 30 lots. You can do the math. That's pretty good cost recovery for that bylaw. There's also so those are the 2 cost recovery bylaws, and those are the amounts of the deferral for growth. One's 20% and one's just slightly under 20%.
Deputy, follow up? Okay, any other comments? Okay, Madam Clerk, would you read that recommendation defer one more time, please?
That South Huron Council defer the recommendation to authorize staff to finalize negotiations with the Tridon Group for the Grand Bend Trunk Sewer Extension and prepare a draft cost sharing agreement for council consideration as amended.
Okay, we'll call the question. All in favor? And that fails. Thank you. Ms. Masula Carlson, next steps, please.
So since the deferral failed, then the resolution comes back.
Thank you. And could you read the resolution, please, Ms. Wolf?
That South Huron Council authorizes staff to finalize negotiations with the Tridon Group for the Grand Bend Trunk Sewer Extension and prepare a draft cost sharing agreement for council consideration at a future council meeting.
We have a mover and a seconder now. If there's no further discussion, Councillor Vaughn, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd just like a recorded vote on this.
Yes. Any other comments? Councillor Oak?
And just wondering whether this should future council meeting or committee of the whole. I'm just thinking that it'd still be nice to have it discussed at a committee of the whole meeting when it does come back versus just a regular council meeting. Just to get more in depth at the time, whether that would be acceptable to the mover and seconder.
Deputy, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Just a comment that we need to have that committee of the whole meeting as soon as possible after we get the information so that we're not dragging this out through our budget meetings.
Thank you. And Councillor Neebe, you had something? Go ahead.
Yep, no, I'm in agreement. I think adding the committee of the whole into the resolution is good. We need to have that discussion and get that information when it's available.
Thank you. And Councillor Oak?
And just a question, whether the cost sharing agreement, whether that would be available for budget talks by then?
I'll turn to Mr. Giverson. Comments, please.
Through you, Mayor Finch, we'll give it our best shot. The time is of the essence here, and so yeah, we'll keep moving the process along.
Thank you. And no further discussions. I'll turn to Ms. Wolf.
So that South Huron Council authorizes staff to finalize negotiations with the Tridon Group for Grand Bend Trunk Sewer Extension and prepare a draft cost sharing agreement for council consideration at a future committee of the whole for discussion.
Agreed. Yes. And okay.
Councillor Oak,
Yes.
Councillor Neebe,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dietrich,
Yes.
Councillor Vaughn,
Sorry.
No.
And Deputy, could you reiterate?
Yes.
Mayor Finch,
Yes.
and Councillor Dietrich.
Yes.
So that carries 5-1.
Thank you. 9.4.1.
That the memo of Rebecca Msuya Collison, Chief Administrative Officer, dated September 5th, 2023 be received, and that council authorize the transfer easement as presented, and that the bylaw be forwarded for the required 3 readings.
And do we have a mover for that, please? Moved by Councillor Neebe, seconded by Councillor Dietrich. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? And that carries with 6. Thank you. Are there any notices of motion tonight, Ms. Wolf?
There are none.
Thank you. 11.1 comments. Mr. Carlson, any comments?
This is a follow-up delegation from the request of the Huron Health System at the September 5th meeting.
Mr. Neebe, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor Finch, through the chair. With the Huron Health System's request to South Huron Council, I think we need to carefully consider what is being proposed and ensure that any decision that is made is reflective of the reality of the municipality and its taxpayers' ability to pay, while having a clear and transparent understanding of what South Huron's role is in delivering or paying for health services in our region. We've heard about other examples of municipalities assisting in certain capacities with clinics but we've not seen a financial model as of yet to indicate what that capacity is, nor what that could be for South Huron. There's a lot more information that I feel that I need in order to move forward with any decision, whether it be joining committee or ongoing financial commitment. I'd like to make a motion that we ask staff to investigate this request further, including investigating the status of the clinic and bringing back information to council at a future meeting or committee of the whole.
Thank you. Deputy? You're seconding that?
Yeah, I'll second it. I just like to agree with Councillor Neeb. This is way too open for me to make some kind of a statement on what they've asked for, which to me is $500,000, what I see the numbers. So I think we're going to have a lot more information come back to this council before I can make that kind of decision. That's a lot of dollars. Thank you.
Yep, that's Councillor Oak, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I think one of the other requests was that there be a committee formed, and I would let my name stand to be a council rep on the committee if such a committee were to be formed. Just throwing that out there. So I think that was one of their recommendations, that there be a task force or committee struck to investigate as part of this. So
Yes, thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Neeb, you had something?
And I think I just need more information before we would take that step. I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea. I think it would be very valuable to have Councillor Oak or any of us on council sitting on a committee to have that discussion, to have that relationship built up. But I also want to look at what other models exist in other municipalities and how does that process work, and before we take that dive in.
Thank you. Councillor Vaughn, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think that's great that Councillor Oak is volunteering to be our eyes and ears on that committee. I'd hate for it to be called, though, actually a committee of council, because it's not a committee of council. Committee of council to me is one where we establish what the terms of reference are. And we have an agenda in terms of what we would like for information and to be able to fulfill. So I don't know exactly what you would call that. But I wouldn't really like, I mean, Bruce, it was mentioned in the delegation that having the committee of council, if you will, is giving it sort of weight out in the public eye. And I'm not sure we're there. We're not there for giving that weight, but we do need more information.
Councillor Oak.
I agree. I think where I envision maybe this committee and we need further discussion, but similar to the committee that the mayor sits on with and Rebecca sits on. It's not a committee of council. It's just we're representatives on your representatives on a outside committee. I think that's a retention or the recruitment and retention committee sort of thing. So I agree with Councillor Vaughn that way too far away from all the information we need to decide if we need a committee of council in this situation.
Yeah, certainly exploratory times, what I'm hearing here. Any other deputy, you had something? Go ahead.
Just a comment. I agree. I think we need to let someone else lead this. And if they're asking for somebody down the road for a council member, that's when we step in. I don't want to get in too early because then we're going to end up leading it. And to me, that's not our position, not our job. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? And I'll ask Ms. Wolf to read the motion here in a moment.
The council directs staff to investigate the requests of the Huron Health System further, including the status of the health clinic, and requests that a report be brought back to council for future consideration at a committee of the whole.
Satisfied with that, Mr. Neep?
Yep, or a council meeting or committee of the whole. I do think it would maybe just leave it, sorry, as a committee of the whole, just there's a lot to unpack. So.
You're satisfied with that, Deputy? Good. If there's any further discussion, call the question. All in favor? That carries with 6. Thank you. Okay, item number, go ahead, Ms. Sue Carlson.
This is a follow-up from the Sunset Community Foundation. They had a delegation to council September 5th.
Councillor Oak, go ahead, please.
I'd like to refer this to an upcoming budget meeting. This discussion. We had a special purpose committee prior. That committee ended and whether further discussion at a budget meeting to decide if what direction we go in the future here. So I'd like to refer this to an upcoming budget meeting.
Do you resolution for that?
Yeah, we could, yes.
Ms. Wolf, when you're ready.
The council refer the request from the Sunset Community Foundation to consider another 3-year commitment of $50,000 to budget meeting deliberations.
Councillor Oak, satisfied with that? Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dietrich? Are you seconding or comment?
Comment.
I need a seconder first before we, are you willing to second it and then comment?
Yeah, yeah.
Second it. Go ahead, Mr. Dietrich. Yeah.
I'm not in favor of this deal altogether. I'd like to wipe it right off the books. Why can't they do the same as Terry Fox does or something like that if they need money? Like run your own little campaign. Why is everybody here wanting handouts all the time?
Okay, Councillor Neeb, do you have a comment?
Yeah, and thank you through the chair. So initially, I believe it was 4 years ago, council used to receive a number of community grant requests, and that was an ongoing process as part of our budget discussions. And usually we would have there were probably about 2 to 3 hour budget meetings where we would discuss handing out $60,000. So one of the things was if we were to take that funding and invest it into the foundation, we would provide an opportunity for a group other than council to have that funding to build in a foundation, so that one day the interest would be able to be providing those grants. So in my opinion, I think it's worthwhile to make that investment, mostly because we're investing down the road and we're also not having to have 3 extra budget meetings to discuss. It does take the politics out of the process and puts it in the hands of the community.
Thank you, Mr. Neeb. Well explained. Deputy Mayor, go ahead, please.
And we did do that with, I believe, 3 years of $50,000. So we've already gave them $150,000. And we said when that was done, that was the end of it. So I think this needs to go to budget for a big final discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vaughn, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm in agreement that it should go to budget for final discussion, but I also would like to add to Councillor Neeb's commentary that it's true. We did have discussions at budget meetings that lasted for days. At least it felt like days. And it was political about, who in what neighborhood gets the money kind of thing. It was crazy. But part of that, what came out of there was the sunshine or the $150,000 or $140,000, but we also entered into a bunch of MOUs. So those ones that we felt were worthwhile to continue on, like Elmville Park and the Lions Club Youth Center and things like that, went into MOUs. So when we say 60,000, that's not totally true that, there was some fudging around there with some MOUs that are permanent now, as well as to the community foundation. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments then? Councillor Dietrich, go ahead, please. Nope. No, yeah.
So what you're trying to tell me is we can't accept change?
I'm not sure what you're saying, but go ahead. Councillor Neve, do you want to comment?
No, I'm in agreement. I do think we need to have a discussion about it too. I think one of the items too that during the presentation was the goal is to make the fund self-sustaining. And there is a limit to how much we are able to pay as a municipality and as taxpayers. But at the same time, I think if we don't fund it to where it's more self-sustaining, we are still going to see requests come in from the community too. So I do think it's worthwhile that we do. Maybe we just need to have that discussion at the budget meeting, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? I'll have Ms. Wolf read the motion here in a moment.
The council refer the request from Sunset Community Foundation to consider another 3-year commitment of $50,000 to budget meeting deliberations. And that was moved by Councillor Oak and seconded by Councillor Dietrich.
Any further discussion? Call the question, all in favor? And that carries a 6. Thank you. Moving right along, number 12.1, Ms. Masula Carlson.
That in accordance with section 262 of the Municipal Act 2001, Council of the Municipality of South Huron does hereby declare one of the offices of Councillor Ward 2 to be vacant.
And we have a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Oak, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Discussion. Thank you. Call the question, all in favor? And that carries a 6. Thank you. Mayor and Councillor comments and announcements. Are there any comments at this time? Deputy.
Sorry, going back to that last one, where do we go from here? What do we do from?
Sure, we can go back. Ms. Masula Carlson.
I can give you a high level, but the clerk probably can give you a little bit more. She'll be coming back with a report to the next meeting with options for council to consider. There are a few options, but I can let Alex maybe speak a little bit more to that.
Ms. Wolf.
Yes, the Municipal Act sets out specific options available to council when a vacancy occurs. Part of the process is at the first meeting after the vacancy or the individual's resigned. That's when you declare the vacancy. So that's what we're doing at this point in time. And I will be bringing a report back to the October 2nd meeting with your different options. The Act does state that there's like a 60-day timeline, whether the vacancy is filled or council direct a by-election. So more information will follow in that report on October 2nd.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, very well. We'll move on. Mayor and Councillor comments and announcements. Are there any at this point? Councillor Vaughn, go ahead.
I don't really have a comment, but I do have a question. We've been doing an awful lot of talking about budget, and I know we got some meetings coming up. And so just occurs to me in terms of the wind turbine fund. Last council, we actually had a little committee talking about how we were going to use those funds. And I'm just wondering if that's something that's coming up in this round of budget.
Ms. Masula Carlson.
Through the mayor. Yes, next, the council meeting on the this one in September, we'll have a report from the treasurer on the wind turbine vibrancy fund. And out of that, council may decide to set up another special purpose committee.
Okay, thank you. Any further?
That's great. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from members of council? Councillor Oak.
Just want to congratulate the Kirkton Fall Fair Committee for another successful fair. Very large crowds, and the weather cooperated very nicely for a great weekend. So congratulations to the Fall Fair Committee.
Yeah, it was very well done for sure. A lot of people out there, so thousands of people attended, which is a testament to that dedication of that community for sure. Any other comments? Councillor Neeb, go ahead.
I had the opportunity to attend the Dashwood Men's Club Wing Night last Thursday night, and there's a good crowd there, and it was really nice to see. So typically they do a steak night and then a wing night each year, and it was a good time, and it was nice to see the hall being used and the pavilion, and yeah, I look forward to some more other events. I think they take a hiatus, and they'll be having more events in the spring and the summer.
That's great. Any other comments? No. Okay, I was at the Terry Fox run yesterday at McNaughton Park. They had quite a few people out to that. It was well attended. And then Haskets had their tree planting service at Morrison Dam. Very well attended. There's over 300 people there from all over, from Elsie Craig and beyond. I was quite impressed to see how many people did turn out for it. So lots of people remembering their loved ones on a beautiful day. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to the next item, would be communications. And if you want something pulled, just please say pull.
Item 14.1,
Pull.
14.2, which includes 14.2.1 and 14.2.2. Item 14.3.
Okay, 14.1. Aaron, go ahead.
Thank you. It's a request from the Exeter Legion about closing the street down for the march to the cenotaph, and I was just wondering if we needed a motion for that, or.
Ms. Priscilla Carlson.
Yes, if we could get a motion.
Yep,
that'd be wonderful.
I'd be willing to make that motion.
So moved. Is there a seconder? Deputy Mayor, is there any discussion? Councillor Vaughn.
Yeah, it's usually about this time when they do ask about the street closure that we also talk about support that we're giving to the Legion in Exeter and the Legion in Grand Bend. And I wondered if what our plans are for that, or if we need a motion for that as well.
You're talking about the wreath laying?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Ms. Priscilla Carlson.
If Councillor Neeb and Deputy Mayor Dietrich are agreeable, we'll just add it to this resolution as well. I believe it was it $50 for both?
Each.
Grand Bend and for Exeter. Remember, it's day services.
Yeah, I think
50
they were
each.
50
yes.
each.
Yeah.
Very good. Councillor Neeb,
Yep, that sounds great.
Deputy. Excellent. Ms. Wolf, did you want to read that when you're ready?
That South Huron Council hereby approve the temporary closure of roads for the route of the annual Legion Remembrance Parade to be held on Sunday, November 5th, 2023, beginning at 9:45 a.m. at the Legion, proceeding to the cenotaph and returning to the Legion following the ceremony. And that South Huron Council agree to purchase a wreath for the Exeter and Grand Bend cenotaph ceremony.
Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That carries with 6. Thank you.
Mayor,
sorry.
just, I didn't ask for 14.2, but just as a follow-up, it was brought up at the last meeting. I'm just following up where the discussion was, or where, because Councillor Vaughn brought it up the last meeting, and just wondering where we're at with that.
Ms. Carlson.
To the chair, I did note that it would be coming further by the clerk to a committee of the whole bylaw review framework.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Recommendation after 14.3.
That South Huron Council receive communication items not otherwise dealt with.
And a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Neeb, seconded by Councillor Dietrich. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That carries with 6. Thank you. 15, closed session, report from closed session. Under 16, 17.1, please.
That South Huron Council gives first, second, third, and final reading to bylaw 55/2023, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 69/2018 of the municipality of South Huron for lands described as lots 35 and 36, part lot 34, plan 126, Stephen Ward, municipality of South Huron.
And a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Vaughn, seconded by Councillor Dietrich. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That carries with 6. 17.2, please.
The South Huron Council gives first, second, third, and final reading to bylaw 56/2023, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a cost apportioning agreement between Sable Bayfield Conservation Authority, ABCA, and the Corporation of the Municipality of South Huron.
And a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Oak, seconded by Councillor Neeb. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That carries with 6. Thank you. 18, please.
That South Huron Council gives first, second, third, and final reading to bylaw 57, 2023, being a bylaw to confirm matters addressed at the September 18th, 2023 council meeting.
And a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Dietrich, seconded by Councillor Neeb. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That carries with 6. Thank you. 19, please.
Let South Huron Council hereby adjourn at 7:25 PM to meet again on October 2nd, 2023 at 6 PM or at the call of the chair.
Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Neeb. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That carries with 6. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for attending this evening.